Xylo monitored the manifestation of this planetary stigma, noting how Ray consistently retreated to consume her synthesized midday meal within the common area's most shadowed, overlooked recess. He observed, repeatedly, the fragile, calculated attempts of the young Earthling to bridge the cultural and xenophobic gap, but the other students, genetically programmed for survival, remained too innately wary of the mythic Deathworlder to ever initiate, or even permit, true reciprocal interaction. A radical pedagogical theorem crystallized within Xylo's mind, to demonstrate the fundamental, terrifying universality of biological persistence by exposing the inherent lethality present on every home sphere. When viewed through the lens of true cosmic perspective, where every planetary body contains zones of catastrophic, intrinsic hostility, the fear surrounding Ray would resolve into mere scientific data, allowing the blossoming of genuine, unbiased camaraderie. Settling into his gravity-neutral chair, Xylo activated the omniscreen. In 3 standardized weeks, I shall mandate a comprehensive video transmission from each student cohort, he announced, his voice reverberating with a subtle, synthetic echo. This presentation must precisely document the respective homeworld, concentrating specifically on its systemic existential hazards, both the predatory, biological manifestations and the geotectonic instabilities. He paused, the threat hanging in the air. Cooperative data gathering is permitted for students of shared origin, but comprehend this, the presentation constitutes 40% of your terminal assessment. Dedicate an effort congruent with that overwhelming probabilistic weight. Consequently, Ray, the singular Terran specimen in the entire educational block, commenced her solitary, rigorous labor, meticulously cataloguing the astonishing array of indigenous perils that defined her primary world, a task concurrently undertaken by all her xenophobic classmates. Presentation cycle commenced. Ray, scheduled as the 3rd subject, waited, a subtle thermal tremor betraying her nervous anticipation. Yet, a deeper curiosity held her. What localized terrors afflicted these other worlds? She would receive her data shortly. The initial data stream originated from the Cathar homeworld. Its 3 representatives meticulously detailed the planet's lethal bioforms, projecting a recording of a moderately-sized, furred quadruped exhibiting a densely furred caudal appendage. Observe the lethality index now. One presenter hissed, his voice amplified with artificial excitement. The visual demonstrated the creature reacting to a dangling textile lure, emitting a high-frequency acoustic warning before executing a reflexive, biomechanical strike. Retractable, keratinous spikes, razor-sharp talons previously hidden, extended instantaneously from the pore sheath as the beast attacked the synthetic fabric. Analyze that rapid deployment system. The presenter shrieked at the visualizer. Those hyper-sharp, evolved hooks were not manifest moments ago. This apex predator would cleave the flesh down to the cortical bone of a sentient being's limb. A wave of relieved, nervous murmuring swept through the observation theater. The presenters, visibly flushed with the pride of existential terror, returned to their stations. Ray alone remained untouched by the manufactured dread, her facial musculature locked in an expression of profound, uncomprehending confusion. Xylo, detecting the anomaly in her neurovisual feedback, initiated communication. Query, Ray. Still processing the absurdity, Ray provided the data. But Instructor, was that not merely a domesticated feline? A sharp, suppressed ripple of alien mirth broke the tension. Instructor Xylo silenced the room with a raised hand, though a flicker of amusement crossed his own biosensor display. Negative, Ray. That organism is a vicious, unmanageable predator. Its cohabitation with any sentient species is strictly prohibited, unless one has a calculated disregard for anatomical integrity. Ray, still profoundly confused by the species-specific terror, simply nodded, awaiting the next planetary data transmission. The second cohort took the stage, their lead orator declaring, "The terrestrial predator is transient, yet nothing inspires the existential dread of what we term death from the skies." They plunged into hyperbolic data concerning their home world's winged scourge, an aerial menace capable of descending at velocity, stripping muscle from calcified bone, instilling civic panic with the mere transit of its shadow across the terra firma. The presentation was deliberately overdramatized, underscored by low-frequency, terror-inducing soundscapes. The visual focused finally on the airborne horror, a vibrant, feathered creature possessing a short, powerful, curved mandibular structure. Now claws are bad enough, a presenter cautioned, but observe the mechanical advantage of this creature's beak. The recording showed the avian entity grasping a dense, hardened seed and applying crushing force, the rupture echoing through the academic chamber. The seed's protective case cracked, exposing the nutrient-rich interior, which the creature then consumed. The alien students erupted in gasps. Did you perceive that crushing pressure? Imagine that force applied to an exposed digital extremity. We are blessed that such evolutionary aberrations do not haunt our biosphere. Ray, rendered silent by the escalating absurdity, finally vocalized her observation. She waved a dismissive hand toward the screen. That is merely an avian paratoid, otherwise known as a parakeet. A chilling silence descended upon the chamber. Low murmurs of unwarranted arrogance and xenophobic judgment were audible. Instructor Xylo felt the catastrophic backfire of his initial hypothesis. The Earthling's behavior was now moving beyond simple pleasantness and toward overt sociological hostility. Ray, he stated, the sternness in his voice deliberately augmented. You will now approach the presentation terminal. Due to an incomprehensible internal conflict, Ray hesitated, remaining anchored to her seat. Instructor, she finally articulated, a tremor in her voice. I believe there has been a profound misinterpretation of the core directive. I was under the impression we were to document planetary hazards, not the domesticated fauna kept within controlled residential structures. Instructor Xylo produced a noise somewhere between a gasp and a cough. Domesticated? That feathered merchant of death? It is genetically incapable of being a pet. Ray's posture visibly collapsed, and she mumbled a near-inaudible subvocalization. What exactly did you just transmit? The instructor demanded, leaning forward. Immediately, an adjacent student, perhaps seeking defensive solidarity, stood. She stated that her 4-year-old cousin successfully cohabits with a parakeet, instructor. The instructor fixed Ray with a digital glare. You will deploy your presentation immediately, or I shall file a formal academic grievance with your parental figures, resulting in a quantifiable score of 0 for this terminal assessment. Driven by inevitability and crushing reluctance, Ray detached from her desk and moved toward the front. The gaze of every peer was fixed upon her, a collective scrutiny devoid of warmth. Ray understood the cold mathematical reality. Her current social standing was terminal, and this impending broadcast would ensure perpetual isolation. If their psychological breaking point was a domesticated parrot, then they would receive the undiluted biological horror they requested. Accepting her fate, Ray began. My presentation concerns the systemic environmental dangers indigenous to my home world, officially designated Earth. On the main visual display, a lone blue marble of a planet materialized, executing a slow, profound rotation. Within the northern polar landmasses of my primary continent, we encounter evolved macropredators utterly lacking in fear, she narrated, the tone clinically detached. An image of a squat, robust creature instantly populated the monitors. The visual field then shifted to a serene, white-blanketed expanse, before the creature suddenly erupted from beneath the ground layer, a violent explosion of granular, frozen water spraying in all directions. The entire student body emitted a unified, distressed scream of alarm. Ray paused the stream. The Terran designation Wolverine was superimposed over the snarling, vicious visage of the revealed predator. What biological engine is that? One student queried, the digit pointing at the monitor trembling. It is a wolverine, Ray replied flatly. A particularly hostile animal that. Negative, the student interjected, his voice high-pitched. We demand the data on the white substance. What is that ubiquitous, pulverized medium? Disoriented by the alien focus, Ray directed her attention back to the screen. The white substance? That is the snow. SNOW. The alien synthesized the phonemes. Snow? Define snow. Struggling to calibrate her explanation to such profound ignorance, Ray responded, snow is atmospheric water vapor that undergoes cryogenic crystallization before it reaches the ground. A sharp, collective inhalation of alarm. Your atmospheric precipitation freezes in the open environment? Not within a regulated, laboratory condition. Ray merely adjusted her shoulders in the universal gesture of indifference. Affirmative. Approximately 25 to 40% of the standard year, contingent upon geographic latitude. A deep, horrified silence succeeded her statement. Regardless, she continued, resuming the visual stream. The wolverine demonstrates a psychopathic tenacity, willing to engage evolutionary threats significantly larger than itself. She then showed the comparatively small wolverine advancing, teeth bared, against a massive, dark-furred creature. By the seven hells, what is that colossal organism? A student shrieked, pointing at the immense, articulated mass of muscle and sinew known as a grizzly bear. Pausing the projection again, Ray glanced from the monitor to the student. That is a bear. Those specific megafauna are distributed across the entirety of my home world. The student's vocalizer stammered, his body shaking violently in his seat. The entirety? Ubiquitous? How is biological survival even statistically possible for your species? Ray offered a genuine, dark laugh. Oh, bears are certainly a high-tier threat, but statistically, Earth contains infinitely worse biological constructs than the bear. You are generating false data, a voice cut in, and Ray recognized the terrified tremor of Instructor Xylo, who was now gripping the armrests of his chair, his body visibly vibrating with stress feedback. Smiling, the Earthling accelerated the presentation to a visual depicting warm, clear, utterly benign-looking ocean water. 71% of my planet's surface is submerged beneath a vast, aqueous envelope, she stated. Within this fluid environment exist multitudinous creatures, fish, benthic crustaceans, seahorses, cephalopods, and others. As she spoke, pleasant, non-threatening holographic representations of the aforementioned fauna cycled across the screen. We even have forms known as seals, she said, deliberately making eye contact with Xylo's, the seal-like classmate whose anthropomorphic resemblance was uncanny. Xylo's, momentarily forgetting his dread, beamed as he watched the aquatic mammals play and breach the surface tension. We also have creatures classified as sharks, Ray continued, the transition sudden and brutal. Out of the tranquil depths, a colossal Carcharodon megalodon equivalent, a great white shark, launched into the frame, executing a catastrophic predatory attack upon one of the seals. The screen erupted in a high-velocity rush of hemoglobin-stained water, the graphic chunks of shredded biomatter sinking slowly into the abyssal gloom. Xylo sat, his mouth unhinged, emitting a thin, silent, high-frequency scream. Cease the transmission. Terminate the data stream. Instructor Xylo shrieked, half rising from his console. But Instructor, Ray argued, her voice now dangerously calm. I have yet to document the existence of the vampire bats that specialize in excising tissue for blood harvesting, the massive crocodilians, the ambush predator lions, the neurotoxin delivery snakes, the venomous scorpions, or the multi-eyed arachnids. Stop. Just stop. Instructor Xylo gasped, clutching the central sensory organ above his sternum. Xylo stared at Ray with an expression of pure, unfiltered terror. By what impossible evolutionary mechanism did your species achieve self-preservation? He whispered. Because, Ray replied, her voice resonating with clinical finality as she swept her gaze across the paralyzed, wide-eyed faces of her peer group, because the single most proficiently optimized predator and hazard generated by Earth's biosphere are the humans themselves. Having delivered the final, crushing data point, she turned and navigated toward her assigned station. As she proceeded down the aisle, she could not fail to observe the instinctive, fear-driven recoil of the other students, their bodies attempting to maximize distance from the Deathworld emissary. When the midday nutrient consumption period arrived, Ray felt the onset of profound, systemic despair. Her presentation had achieved its purpose, securing her eternal self-imposed isolation. As she nibbled at her synthetic sandwich, her appetite nullified by dread, a shadow fell across her workstation. She looked up and saw the seal-like Xylo standing over her. Ray merely returned his gaze with a look of profound resignation. That was awesome, Xylo stated earnestly. Did you actually encounter a shark in its live state? He asked, lowering himself to the seat adjacent to hers. Jolted by the unexpected, positive reinforcement, Ray managed to respond. Yes, my terrestrial relative and I secured one during a controlled aquatic harvest. It was dimensionally inferior to the projected visual, however, she admitted. You captured one. Xylos gasped, processing the sheer lethality of the action. The thought of subduing such a relentless, biomechanical beast. Another shadow fell, and another student advanced. Provide the data regarding the Chiroptera sanguivorus, the vampire bat constructs. They sound existentially frightening. And then another shadow, and another. Ray, her resigned expression dissolving into genuine, astonished delight, attempted to manage the overwhelming query stream, but the density of questions was too high. When the nutrient consumption period ended, Ray found herself enveloped by a cohort of newly admiring, horrified students as she transitioned back to the classroom. Observing the scene from his reinforced window, Instructor Xylo allowed himself a faint, complex smile. The pedagogical objective had been achieved, though the procedural steps had deviated wildly from the initial plan. He returned to the arduous task of grading Ray's submission. He attempted to analyze more of her provided data stream during the recess, but was forced to cease observation upon visualizing the efficiency with which a small aquatic fish, a piranha, reduced a large bovine herbivore to bone structure. He emitted a low, synthetic chuckle. If she is the product of such an inherently hostile environment, he determined, logging the final score, then she has demonstrably earned the terminal assessment of A+.